Hi everybody, I am back. While editing, I realized I cut out so much of my personal stuff that what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna say it and do it, and if it makes it in, it makes it in. But like, I gotta realize too, people like what I have to say. So hot in here. It is hot, hot out. This is after I posted my first video, or that was in June, and it is now July. And I have added some of my art up here. I would love any kind of advice in the comments about anything you see with this video. Oh, you can still see my hands. Okay, good. Because this thing is like up to here on me if I was up close to it. And should I have dried my hair? Probably. Do I care? No. Because like you'll see some of the videos, I had makeup smudged all over. I just wanted to state from here that this is not, you know, intended for children. I will be discussing dark themes. Whoever watches, watches. I'm mindful of that. I just want to say my intent is more of an adult, young adult, older adult kind of audience. So without further ado, I hate giving long introductions. Just get to it, girl. All right. So we are on to now chapter 16. Diana is invited to tea with tragic results. Another classic, another one that always ends up in the TV shows. I'm also going to try to do my quotes from the book. So when we begin the chapter, we find out that it is October and Anne is so grateful to have Octobers. She really wants to bring in some maple tree branches for her bedroom, but Marilla remarks, bedrooms are for sleeping in, and Anne keeps bringing all these different things in from outside. And adds, and she's not wrong, that you are supposed to also dream in a bedroom. She reminds Marilla that it's much easier to dream in beautifully decorated rooms than those that are not. So of course, Marilla concedes. She tells Anne to make sure there are no leaves on the stairs. She reminds Anne that she has the Aid Society tonight and wouldn't be back until after dark. It'll be on Anne to make sure Jerry and Matthew both have supper. And of course, reminds her to not forget to pour the tea as well. Anne apologizes for the time that she did forget and reminds Marilla, or rather lets Marilla know, that was the day she was thinking up the name for Violet Vale. It was dreadful of me to forget, said Anne apologetically, but that was at the afternoon I was trying to think of a name for Violet Vale and it crowded other things out. Matthew was so good. He never scolded a bit. He put the tea down himself and said we could wait a while as well as not. And I told him a lovely fairy story while we were waiting. So he didn't find the time long at all. It was a beautiful fairy story, Marilla. I forgot the end of it, so I made one up for myself. And Matthew said he couldn't tell when the join came in. Marilla, of course, responds with, Matthew would think it all right, Anne, if you took a notion to get up and have dinner in the middle of the night. But you keep your wits about you this time. And I don't know if I am doing right. It may make you more adulpated. It may make you more adulpalated than ever. But you can ask Diana to come over and spend the afternoon with you and have tea here. Of course, unsurprisingly, this absolutely elates Anne. She declares that Marilla absolutely can imagine, or she never would have known how much it was a desire of Anne's to give tea, especially to Diana, all grown-up-ish. Marilla, of course, doesn't let Anne use the good tea set when she asks to, but she tells her she can open the cherry preserves as they're going to go bad anyways, eat up the fruitcake, cookies, and snaps from the jar, and she can use the brown tea set. Anne imagines her and Diana just sitting there enjoying tea, and she absolutely cannot wait. She thinks about her asking Diana, would you like some more fruitcake? Oh, pass the tea. Pass the biscuits. She absolutely cannot wait, and she asks Marilla if she can bring Diana to the spare room to take off her hat and coat. And Marilla responds, no, the sitting room will do for you and your company, but there's a bottle half full of raspberry cordial that was left over from the church social the other night. It is on the second shelf of the sitting room closet, and you and Diana can have it if you'd like. It spells cookie, C-O-O-K-Y. And a cookie to eat with it along in the afternoon, for I dare say Matthew will be late coming into tea since he's hauling potatoes to the vessel. It seems that for everything Anne asks for and is denied, Marilla then turns around and gives her even more than she could imagine ever having. Marilla is properly softened and spreadable at this point. Anne absolutely flies over to the Barry house to ask Diana over for tea. And when she arrives later on, Anne answers the door in her second best outfits. The girls shake hands gravely as if they are meeting for the very first time. Anne takes Diana to her room. It says the East Gable, and I'm pretty sure that's her room, to lay down her hat. And the two go to the sitting room and are quiet and grave in this exact manner for 10 whole minutes. How is your mother? Anne inquired politely, just as if she had not seen Mrs. Barry picking apples that morning in excellent health and spirits. She is very well, thank you. I suppose Mr. Cuthbert is hauling potatoes to the Lily Sands this afternoon, is he? Said Diana, who had ridden down to Mr. Harmon Andrews that morning in Matthew's cart. Yes, our potato crop is going very good this year. I hope your father's crop is good too. It is fairly good, thank you. you. Have you picked many of your apples yet? Oh, ever so many, says Anne, forgetting to be dignified and jumping up quickly. Let's go out to the orchard and get some of the red sweetings, Diana. Marilla says we can have all that are left on the tree. Marilla is a very generous woman. She said we could have fruitcake and cherry preserves for tea, but it isn't good manners to tell your company what you're going to give them to eat, so I won't tell you what she said we can have to drink. Only it begins with an R and a C and is a bright red color. I love bright red drinks, don't you? They taste twice as good as any other color. These are pre-red 40 dye, red 3 dye, red whatever dyes. So yeah, naturally red drinks. I agree. I love their little talks, their little adult talks. So serious. I remember when I would play house with my cousins and we would act in like the exact same ways. Very serious, have conversations about jobs. And oh my goodness, the father of my child ran away. And how am I supposed to provide for these 3 babies? And they're your little dolls. Anyways, talking about your pretend life as an adult always felt exciting, imagining what you're gonna be. Everyone's different. So then the girls spent most of the afternoon in the orchard, eating apples and catching up. And Diana catching Anne up on what was happening in the school. Anne, of course, listens until his name. My phone overheated, so we're gonna hope that we get far with this and that I don't not see that it overheated. So now we've got anxiety. Can't see that it's running because I had to turn off the stuff, so. So anyways, so Anne listens to what Diana is saying about school until his name is brought up. She hurriedly announced, "It is time for raspberry cordial." Quote, Anne looked on the second shelf of the room pantry, but there was no bottle of raspberry cordial. Search revealed it away back on the top shelf. Anne put it on the tray and set it aside with a tumbler. Anne says she doesn't really want any right now, but Diana can absolutely help herself. And she does and sips away daintily. Diana remarks that she has never had raspberry cordial quite as good as this one. And yeah, Diana, that's for a reason that we're going to find out very soon. Anne goes over to stir the fire, remarking that there are so many responsibilities and one is keeping house. When Anne came back from the kitchen, Diana was already drinking her second cup of cordial. Anne also offered no particular objection to her having a third, so she filled yet another generously filled tumbler of cordial up. "The nicest I ever drank," said Diana. "It is ever so much nicer than Mrs. Lynde's. She brags of hers so much. It doesn't taste a bit like hers." "I should think Marilla's raspberry cordial would probably be much nicer than Mrs. Lynde's," said Anne loyally. "Marilla is a famous cook. She is trying to teach me to cook, but I assure you, Diana, it is uphill work. There is so little scope for the imagination in cookery. You just have to go by the rules. The last time I made a cake, I forgot to put the flour in. I was thinking about the loveliest story about you and me, Diana. I thought you were desperately ill with smallpox and everybody deserted you, but I went boldly to your bedside and nursed you back to life. And then I took the smallpox and died, and I was buried under those poplar trees in the graveyard, and you planted a rose bush by my grave and watered it with your tears, and you never ever forgot that friend of your youth who sacrificed her life for you. Oh, it was such a pathetic tale, Diana. Tears just ran down over my cheeks while I mixed the cake, but I forgot the flour, and the cake was a dismal failure. Flour is so essential to cakes, you know." Marilla was very cross, and I don't wonder. I'm such a great trial to her. She was terribly mortified about the pudding sauce last week. We had plum pudding for dinner on Tuesday, and there was half the pudding in a pitcherful of sauce left over. Marilla said there was enough for another dinner and told me to just set it in the pantry and cover it. I meant to cover it just as much as could be, Diana, but when I carried it in, I was imagining I was Catholic and taking the veil to bury a broken heart in cloistered seclusion, and forgot all about the covering the pudding the sauce. I forgot all about covering the pudding sauce. I thought of it next morning and I ran to the pantry, Diana. Fancy, if you can, my extreme horror at finding a mouse drowned in that pudding sauce. I lifted the mouse out with a spoon and I threw it out in the yard, and I washed the spoon in 3 waters. Marilla was out milking, and I fully intended to ask her when she came in if I could give the sauce to the pigs. But when she did come in, I was imagining that I was a frost fairy going through the woods, turning the trees red and yellow, whichever they wanted to be. So I never thought about pudding sauce again, and Marilla sent me out to pick apples. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Chester Ross from Spencervale came here that morning. You know, they are very stylish people, especially Mrs. Chester Ross. Marilla called me and dinner was all ready and everybody was at the table. I tried to be as dignified and polite as I could be, for I wanted Miss Chester Ross to think I was a ladylike little girl, even if I wasn't pretty. There she goes again, diminishing herself. Everything went right until Marilla came in with the plum pudding in one hand and the pitcher of pudding sauce warmed up in the other, Diana. That was a terrible moment. I remembered everything and I just stood up in place and shrieked out, Marilla, you mustn't use that pudding sauce. There was a mouse drowned in it. I forgot to tell you before. Oh, Diana, I shall never forget that awful moment if I live to be 100. Mrs. Chester Ross just looked at me. I thought I would sink in the floor with mortification. See, she is such a perfect housekeeper, and fancy what she must have thought of us. Marilla turned red as fire. She never said a word. Then she just carried that sauce and pudding out and brought in some strawberry preserves. She even offered me some, but I couldn't swallow a mouthful. It was like a heaping coal of fire on my head. After Mrs. Chester Ross went away, Marilla gave me a dreadful scolding. Why, Diana, what is the matter? Okay, mouse in the pudding. Yeah, that would absolutely freak me out. And I have forgotten things so many times to do, to the point where I've had people misunderstand me and think I just didn't care, but no, I genuinely just am so absent-minded when I have a lot of stuff going on. I've also had a moment where in the past, I thought it was a joke to spit at my dad, and it wasn't. You know, they got very upset, and so they sent me to my room and they had yelled at me, and then I refused to eat when I came out, no matter what they did, because I felt like I did something so wrong. The punishment, they let me back out to eat, and the punishment did not match what I thought it should be, so I refused to eat that night. I don't think I've talked about that already, and if I did, I cut it out. Anyways, you know, whatever is the matter, Diana? Diana had stood up very unsteadily, then sat down again, putting her hands in her head. I'm awful sick, she said a little thickly. I must go right now. I must go right home. Oh, you mustn't dream of going home without your tea, cried Anne in distress. I'll get it right off. I'll go and put the tea down this very minute. I must go home, repeated Diana, stupidly but determinedly. Let me get you a lunch anyhow, implored Anne. Let me give you a bit of fruitcake and some of the cherry preserves. Lie down on the sofa for a little while and you'll feel better. Where do you feel bad? I must go home, said Diana, and that was all she would say. In vain, Anne pleaded. I never heard of company going home without tea, she mourned. Oh, Diana, do you suppose that it's possible you're really taking the smallpox? If you are, I'll go and nurse you. You can depend on that. I will never forsake you. But I do wish you'd just stay until after tea. Where do you feel bad? I'm awfully dizzy, said Diana. And indeed, she walked very dizzy. Anne, with tears of disappointment in her eyes, got Diana's hat and went with her as far as Barry's yard fence. Then she wept all the way back to Green Gables, where she sorrowfully put in the reminder of the raspberry cordial back into the pantry and got ready for Matthew and Jerry, with all the zest gone out of her performance. I wonder what is making Diana so ill and speak so marbly and feel so dizzy. Maybe she does have POTS. Maybe she does have smallpox. Maybe that would be preferable. Just kidding. Smallpox never preferable. That was a joke. So the next day on Sunday, it rained, and on Monday, Marilla sent Anne down to the Lynn's Hollow on an errand, and she arrived back, tears running down her cheeks, and threw herself down on the sofa. Marilla is very concerned that Anne has once again gotten saucy to Mrs. Lynde, and Anne doesn't reply except for more passionate sobs. She demands that Anne answer her, and so Anne sits up and tells her, quote, Mrs. Lynde was up to see Mrs. Barry today, and Mrs. Barry was in an awful state, she wailed. She said I set Diana drunk Saturday and sent her home in a disgraceful condition. And she says I must be a thoroughly bad, wicked little girl. And she's never, ever gonna let Diana play with me again. Oh, Marilla, I'm just so overcome with woe. Marilla stared back in blank amazement. Set Diana drunk, she said when she found her voice. Anne, are you or Mrs. Barry crazy? What on earth did you give her? Not a thing but raspberry cordial, sobs Anne. I never thought raspberry cordial would set people drunk, Marilla. Even if they drank 3 big tumblers full as Diana did. Oh, it sounds so like Mr. Thomas's husband. Mrs. Thomas's husband. But I didn't mean to set her drunk. Drunk fiddlesticks, says Marilla, marching to the sitting room pantry. There on the shelf was a bottle which she had at once recognized as containing some of her 3-year-old currant wine, for which she was celebrated in Avonlea. Although certain of the stricter sort, Mrs. Barry, among those, disapproved strongly of it. And at the same time, Marilla recollected that she had put the bottle of raspberry cordial down in the cellar instead of the pantry as she had told Anne. Yeah, like I said, very memorable moment, always included because horrifying. All people, Mrs. Barry would be one of the people who is horrified that the wine even exists. All the people for this to have happened with, Diana was literally the worst one for poor Anne. When Marilla returned returns to the room. She tells Anne she has a genius for getting into trouble. You went and gave Diana currant wine instead of raspberry cordial. Don't you know the difference yourself? Wait a minute. Hold up, Marilla. Hold up now. Who told her to take some unprompted? Marilla. Anne admits that she never even tried any of the cordial, so she wouldn't have known the difference. Mrs. Barry told Mrs. Lynde that she was simply dead drunk. She just laughed silly-like when her mother asked her what was the matter and went to sleep and slept for hours. Her mother smelled her breath and knew she was drunk. She had a fearful headache all day yesterday. Mrs. Barry is so indignant. She will never believe, but what I did was on purpose. I should think she would be better to punish Diana for being so greedy as to drink 3 glassfuls of anything, said Marilla shortly. Why, 3 big glassfuls would have made her sick even if it had only been cordial. Well, this story will be a nice handle for those folks who are so down on me for making currant wine, although I haven't made any for 3 years, ever since I found out that the minister didn't approve. I just kept that bottle for sickness. Oh, there, child, don't cry. There was no oh. I can't see as you were to blame, although I'm sorry it happened so. I love how here Marilla's automatic instinct has not become to, she chastises Anne at first, of course. I did give her a little sass for that. Her instinct is to automatically defend Anne. And frankly, to me, I would be like, Marilla, let them talk. Sometimes you need someone like Anne to shake a community up. I must cry, said Anne. My heart is broken. The stars and their courses fight against me, Marilla. Diana and I are parted for forever. Oh, Marilla, I little dreamed of this when we first swore our vow of friendship. Don't be foolish, Anne. Marilla insists that Mrs. Barry will absolutely come to her senses when she hears the entire story. She probably thinks Anne was trying to play a joke. She tells Anne to go on over this evening and let her know, but Anne requests that Marilla do it instead, assuming that there would be much better results that way. And Marilla agrees. Afterwards, however, Marilla arrives home completely defeated. Anne can tell just from the look on her face how it went. She knows there's absolutely no use. She still asks, though, Mrs. Barry won't forgive me? Marilla gives us quite the protective, angry little speech. Ready for this one? Mrs. Barry, indeed, snapped Marilla. All the unreasonable women I ever saw. She is the worst. I told her it was a mistake and that you were not to blame, but she simply just didn't believe me. She also rubbed it in about my currant wine and how I always said it couldn't have the least effect on anybody. I just told her plainly that currant wine wasn't meant to be drunk 3 tumblerfuls at a time. And if a child I had to do with was so greedy, I'd sober her right up with a good spanking. We don't condone spanking, but Marilla sticking to her guns and saying, it's okay, Anne. This is, for Marilla, is a burn. Remember, in the beginning, we found out that the only person she ever spoke her mind to, Mrs. Rachel or Matthew, never anyone else. And here she is with Mrs. Barry, of all people, giving her a piece of her mind. I can't even imagine what Mrs. Barry was thinking in that moment. She probably expected Marilla to not even show up, to just be like, well, Anne, you did it, blah, blah, blah. But no, that must have been such a shocker. And I'm kind of, this time around now, a little curious to pay attention to if other people notice this in Marilla. I wish this could have or did change anything for Anne, but of course it didn't. It takes growth and understanding to have the and situation in your mind. So I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but one thing in therapy that has really helped me, and that just in life, is to replace the word but with the word and, because the word but makes everything you say before and after meaningless, while as and includes the whole picture. So for instance, I love you, but that sounds like you're about to immediately, you're like, okay, what are they going to say about me that they don't like, oh my gosh. But if you say, I love you and, so I love you but I need space, is a lot more defense inducing than I love you and I need some space. And that kind of leads into I need this for me versus a you've done something wrong kind of a thing. So it takes some growth and understanding to be like, Marilla did this for me, that was incredible, and my life feels like it's over. So Marilla, upset, goes into the kitchen and leaves Anne behind after this. Anne does not want to resign to her fate, and frankly, who could blame her? Who would want to? So she steps out into the cool autumn air, bareheaded, and makes her way over to the Barry house. Mrs. Barry, coming to the door in answer to a timid knock, found a white-lipped, eager-eyed suppliant on the doorstep. Her face hardened. Mrs. Barry was a woman of strong prejudices and dislikes. Her anger was, of course, sullen sort, which was always hard to overcome. To do her justice, she really believed Anne had made Diana drunk out of sheer malice prepense, and she was honestly anxious to preserve her little daughter from the contamination of further intimacy with such a child. What do you want? She said to Anne stiffly. Anne clasped her hands. Go back down to where I just read that. Mrs. Barry, please forgive me. I did not mean to intoxicate Diana. How could I? Just imagine if you were a poor little orphan girl that kind people had adopted and you just had one bosom friend in the whole world. Do you think you would intoxicate her on purpose? I thought it was only raspberry cordial. I was firmly convinced it was raspberry cordial. Oh, please don't say that you won't let Diana play with me anymore. If you do, you will cover my life in a dark cloud of woe. All, sadly, Anne managed to do was just irritate her even more. She's very suspicious of the way that Anne apologized and assumes Anne was actually making fun of her. Oh man, I've had a situation recently where taking someone at what they were saying was the wrong solution because they meant something else by their words, but I couldn't tell that they meant something else by their words. Led to it, there was communication, worked things out, left me feeling kind of like Anne must in this moment, that no matter what I do, I'm just seen as awful. And then of course you gotta put the mental health work into it, and it's like the and situations have to come in. She tells Anne that she is not a fit little girl for Diana to associate with, and tells her to go home and behave herself. Anne begs to say goodbye to Diana, but Mrs. Barry tells her she isn't home and closes the door. My last hope is gone, she told Marilla. I went up and saw Mrs. Barry and she treated me very insultingly, Marilla. I do not think she's a well-bred woman. There is nothing more to do except pray, and I haven't much hope that'll do much good because Marilla, I do not believe that God himself can do very much to such an obstinate person as Mrs. Barry. Marilla tells Anne she shouldn't say such things, of course, stifling a laugh herself. And of course, to her own dismay. When she tells Matthew later, though, she allows the laughter to flow. When she goes up to check on Anne, she notices that she has once again cried herself to sleep. But when she slipped into the east gable before going to bed and found Anne had cried herself to sleep in an unaccustomed softness, crept into her face. Poor little soul, she murmured, lifting a loose curl of hair from the child's tear-stained face. Then she bent down and kissed the flushed cheek on the pillow. My cousin's bus is here. If you can hear that, oh well, because we actually just reached the end of chapter 16. So videos before this, in case anybody kind of missed the little warning, they kind of cut off really abruptly because I thought they were going to go 10 chapters in one video. And I'm now realizing also was told by my lovely friend Susie that cutting it in half for now is probably the best idea. So what I plan to do at the end is when I have each book finished, put them all together, and I hope by then I know how to do like little clips in there, and I don't know, let me know below. Genuinely, please let me know. Help me shape my content. Do you think I should put little tiny clips, like little sounds, or if I talk about a part from the book, instead of me reading it for a second, maybe we get Anne saying it for a moment? I am so curious because I don't know if you can tell, a few people have been able to tell, my kind of intent with this is almost like you want to read the book, but you're like, you're never going to read it, and so your friend is sitting there and you have the attention span to sit there and have your friend go through everything and just kind of tell you the whole story, and then they just happen to have the quotes on hand because they're so smart. So it's like an interactive audiobook is one thing I've been told. Okay, I'm so glad the video made it to the end. Fingers crossed if you're seeing this without dying. We're gonna go charge it a bit, try to get another chapter done. I have family in town from out of town, so I really want to kind of get as much as I can done in one sitting and edit other days. Chapter 17, A New Interest in Life. This title gives me hope for this chapter. When I was writing this, I was in a spot where I really needed some hope, and so I was just genuinely so hopeful. So the next day, Anne is doing her patchwork when she looks over and notices Diana over by the Dryad's bubble. She was beckoning, all mysterious, like right away. Anne springs up and runs to Diana, hoping that there's good news. But of course, as soon as she gets closer, Anne sees Diana's face and realizes that it's not. Something that I'm very familiar with too. A lot of people I'm sure are, where you're like, I know what your answer is going to be, but I have to still ask it anyways. Diana mournfully shares with Anne how her mother told her she is not to play with Anne ever again, despite Diana's crying and extreme crying and begging, saying that it really wasn't Anne's fault. As it was, the best thing that she could get was a 10-minute goodbye with Anne out of her mother. 10 minutes isn't very long to say an eternal farewell, says Anne tearfully. Oh, Diana, will you promise faithfully never to forget me, no matter what dearer friends caress thee? I love the flowery language so much. Indeed I will, sobs Diana, and I'll never have another bosom friend. I don't want to have. I couldn't love anybody as I love you. Oh, Diana, cried Anne, clasping her hands. Do you love me? Why, of course I do. Didn't you know that? No, Anne draws a long breath. I thought you liked me, of course, but I never hoped you loved me. Why, Diana, I didn't think anybody could love me. Nobody has ever loved me since I can remember. Oh, this is wonderful. It's a ray of light which will forever shine in the darkness of path severed from thee, Diana. Oh, just say it again. I love you devotedly, Diana staunched, and I always will. You may be sure of that. That breaks my heart because we know Marilla and Matthew love Anne. I'm sure Mrs. Rachel Lynde loves Anne. It breaks my heart that that's the first time anyone has ever said that they love her. And this is something that in my own life, logically, and that doesn't really match up. If someone doesn't say to me, I love you, in my head, it doesn't matter how you're related to me, my brain wants to tell me you don't. You know, that's something to work on in all of us, but, I will always love thee, Diana, said Anne solemnly, extending her hands. In the years to come, thy memory will shine like a star over my lonely life. As that last story we read together says, Diana, wilt thou give me a lock of thy jet-black tresses in parting to treasure forevermore? Have you got anything to cut it with? Queried Diana, wiping away the tears which Anne's affecting accents had caused to flow afresh, returning to returning to practicalities. Luckily, Anne still has her patchwork scissors on her, so they do in fact have something to cut the hair with. She solemnly clips the curl and says, Fare thee well, my beloved friend. Henceforth we must be as strangers living side by side, but my heart will be ever faithful to thee. I can't imagine the overwhelming sense of doom and loss that Anne is feeling in that moment, that anyone would feel in that moment, but especially young Anne, who had so much optimism that nothing could go wrong. You get that taste of hope, and having it ripped away makes the world just feel so much more hollower, like duller. And it's especially cruel when that other person lives on and you're just not part of their life anymore. And at the time I wrote this, season 3 of Yellow Jackets was premiering, so I inserted something from that season, which did kind of stick with me, no matter how you look at it. There was a quote where someone said, it's not an exact quote, I don't think, but the best way for a relationship to end is through death, if you really think about it. If a relationship ends not because of death, that means something happened between the two of you, whether it was you grew apart, a big falling out. And of course, yes, death is tragic and horrifying, and it's like a dark, morbid thought. You get to keep that person in your mind the way they were. It doesn't get spoiled by the horrible things they said to you or the horrible things you said to them, and that's how your relationship ends. They are forever in your brain, and they still live on. If you no longer talk to them, you have to avoid thinking about them. You can't think about those memories with happiness. Those memories are forever tainted. The memories that become what you cling to would instead be what haunts you and what keeps you up at night. So of course, that's not in like every situation, but that really stuck with me. So back to the story. Anne stands and watches as Diana disappears out of sight. Every time she turns around, Anne makes sure to wave swiftly. Anne returns to the house, not seeing anything romantic in parting from Diana. Knowing the future of this story, I can see the beauty in the way that the two girls talked to each other and in the way that they communicated. And even Diana, Miss Practical, her speech came out so beautiful and romantic to Anne. Anne informs Marilla that it is all doing the headphones again. Anne informs Marilla that it is all over and she shall never have a friend again. Wow, it's so much easier to read along with that when I can hear myself better. Oh, what I was just saying. She feels much worse off than before. At least before she had Katie, Maurice, and Violetta, but after having a real friend, after having Diana of all people, she could never go back to that and feel fulfilled in the slightest. So the world is even more empty for her now. Anne tells Marilla that she made sure to use thou and thee instead of you, as it is far more romantic. Anne says, Diana and I had such an affecting farewell. Diana gave me a lock of her hair and I'm gonna sew it up and wear it in a little bag and wear it around my neck all of my life. Please see that it is buried with me, Marilla, for I don't believe I'll live very long. Just reading that, poor thing. Perhaps when she sees me lying cold and dead before her, Mrs. Barry may feel remorse for what she has done and will let Diana come to my funeral. No, because I've literally been the one that would say things like that. I don't think there's much fear of you dying of grief as long as you can talk, says Marilla unsympathetically. I would ensnare myself, and still do, but I really work harder at it now, into thinking traps, where you're like, I will never, and it's so hard, I'm gonna literally die. But it's just, that would be a moment where I would feel so much for Anne, and I would have a more sympathetic response than Marilla did, but also I would struggle to not laugh. She's like, I'm talking about her funeral if that was a real little kid in front of me. Oh no, please don't mind my braid is out. We're just gonna wait until that undoes a little bit more. My little tie broke. That's fun. Marilla, of course, like we do, knows Anne is much more determined than to just die. And in fact, the next morning, Marilla is surprised once again to see Anne come down the stairs with her school books in hand. She announced she was going back, stating all she had now left in life. At least at school, she could look at Diana. Oh. Poor girl. Marilla reminds her to pay attention to her schoolwork, concealing the fact that she is so relieved in Anne's decision. She reminds Anne to not break any slates over anyone's head or anything. Oh, Marilla, that depends on if a certain someone decides to mess with her again. We are responsible for our own reactions, behaves well for the circumstances, and for who she is. Anne Stan over here. Anne promises to try to be a model pupil, although she admits there'll be absolutely no fun in it, as model pupils aren't much fun. There's not much spark for imagination, just like Minnie Andrews. Anne calls her dull and pokey, never seeming to have fun. But on the other hand, she's pretty sure that with her life circumstances, it won't be that hard to be dull. She takes the normal road, regardless of the dust, because taking the path her and Diana would have taken is far too painful. We find out that Anne's presence was beyond missed at the school. She receives gifts, such as plums, and a cutout of a pansy from a magazine, a prized decoration for a desk, perfume bottle that she can keep her slate water in, a poem, and the offer of learning a new pattern of lace. If you want to know who offered what, go ahead and read the actual book. Or, just look up chapter 17. Trying to get you to read the source material. It wasn't only the girls that appreciated Miss Anne either. Mr. Phillips sits her right next to Minnie Andrews, and of course she's absolutely delighted when she looks down at her desk and sees a strawberry apple sitting right there waiting for her. She goes to take a bite, but before she does, she remembers, wait a minute, who are the only ones that have strawberry apples? The Blythe Farm, that's who. She dropped the apple as if it were a red-hot coal, and ostentatiously wiped her fingers on her handkerchief. Romance and drama. Anne is embracing her shadow side. The apple even actually stays on the ground until the next day when the student who is sweeping claims it for themselves. That evening over to her house, Charlie Sloane brought over a fancy pencil that costs 2 cents instead of 1 and receives a much more gracious reception from Anne. She rewards him with a smile that she has no idea absolutely sends him away to heaven, a goner. Poor Charlie. He genuinely just cares for Anne. She's like completely oblivious, just not interested. Will be nice to him in spite of Gilbert. And the next part I absolutely love because the poetic part is in the narration. It's not like a poem that Anne is creating. It's just in there. But as it's the Caesar's pageant shorn of Brutus's bust, but of Roman's best son, remind her more. So marked the absence of any tribute or recognition from Diana Barry, who is sitting with Gertie Pye embittered. Anne's little triumph. Diana might have just smiled at me once, I think. She mourned to Marilla that night. Basically, Anne is saying, just like in the poem, she is not able to enjoy it as much because Diana didn't so much as smile at her. Probably obvious, but I felt like I had to explain, a little over-explain there. The next morning, however, Anne is handed over a note, most fearfully and wonderfully twisted and folded, and a small parcel passed across to Anne. Dear Anne, ran the former, Mother says I'm not to play with you or talk to you even in school. It isn't my fault. And don't be cross at me. I love you as much as ever. I miss you awfully to tell all my secrets to, and I don't like Gertie Pye one bit. I made you one of my new bookmarkers out of red tissue paper. They are awfully fashionable now, and only 3 girls in school know how to make them. When you look at it, remember, your true friend, Diana Barry. Anne kisses the bookmark after reading the little note and promptly responds, my own darling Diana. My own darling Diana. Of course I am not cross with you. You have to obey your mother. I shall keep your lovely present forever. Minnie Andrews is a very nice little girl, although she has no imagination. But after being Diana's bosom friend, I cannot be Minnie's. Please excuse mistakes because my spelling isn't very good, although much improved. Proved with 2 O's. Trying to see where she misspelled. Besides proved. Yours until death do us part. Anne or Cordelia Shirley. P.S. I shall sleep with your letter under my pillow tonight. A or C.S. The narrator admits to us that Marilla definitely expected way more trouble with Anne going back to school. At least she got her Mr. Phillips. Thenceforth, she flung herself into her studies heart and soul, determined not to be outdone any class by Gilbert Blythe. The rivalry between them was soon apparent. It was entirely good-natured on Gilbert's part, but it is much to be feared the same thing cannot be be said of Anne, who had certainly unpraiseworthy tenacity for holding grudges. She was as intense in her hatred as in her love. She would not stoop to admit that she meant to rival Gilbert in schoolwork, because that would have been to acknowledge his existence, which Anne persistently ignored. But the rivalry was there. I love the whole "she was as intense in her hatreds as her loves" line. Anne is passionate and fiery, just like her hair. And I'm sorry, girlie, I'm giving it as a compliment. One day, Gilbert would be the head of the spelling class in the morning, and by the afternoon, it would be Anne. Vice versa for math. But the worst thing that happened was when they tied and both their names were put together on the board. Ew, 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 ew. Disgusting. To Anne, this is almost as bad as a take notice. And she is equally angry as Gilbert is happy. We find out that at the end of every month, the students have an exam. Gilbert came out 3 marks ahead in the first month, and Anne 5 in the next month. She didn't get to relish it, however, because Gilbert had the audacity to congratulate her in front of everybody. She admits she would have absolutely preferred to lose. Anne is absolutely, in fact, the model pupil, and in turn, by the end of the term, Anne and Gilbert, they both have moved up to the level 5 class with the rest of Anne's friends, and allowed to begin studying the elements of the branches, by which Latin, geometry, French, and algebra were meant. In geometry, Anne met her Waterloo. Waterloo, ooh, Waterloo. It's perfectly awful stuff, Marilla, she groaned. I'm sure I'll never be able to make a head or tail of it. There is no scope for imagination in it at all. Mr. Phillips says I'm the worst dunce he ever saw at it. And some of the other students are so smart at it. It's extremely mortifying, Marilla. Even Diana gets along better than I do, but I don't mind being beaten by Diana. Even as though we meet as strangers now, I still love her with an indistinguishable love. It makes me very sad sometimes to think about her. But really, Marilla, one can't stay sad very long in such an interesting world, can they? That is the end of this chapter. So I went and ate some lunch, rescheduled plans so I can just get through filming for the rest of this video today. Without further ado, on to chapter 18, and to the rescue. All great things are wound up with all things little. At first glance, it might not seem that the decision of a certain Canadian premier to include Prince Edward Island in a political tour have much or anything to do with the fortunes of little Anne Shirley at Green Gables, but it had. Make sure my chicken nuggets aren't on my face. I love noticing the little invisible strings in life. Things where you're like, oh my gosh, if this never happened this way, what would my life ever be like? And this is definitely one of those chapters. Yeah, definitely at this point, I'm like, is this effing play about me? No, it's about Anne. Get out of my head. It was January when the premier came to town. Most of the people in Charleston were his actual supporters. Many men and women made the entire 30-mile drive just to see him speak. We are told Mrs. Rachel Lynde is all fired up to go, although she was absolutely not a supporter. She leaves Thomas behind to look after the house, and if that isn't a perfect explanation of their relationship, I don't know what is. Marilla goes along with her not only because she has a little secret interest in politics herself, but she figures this is also probably her only chance to ever see a real-world premiere in person. She leaves Matthew and Anne with the house. Both of them are enjoying themselves massively. Matthew is on the couch reading The Farmer's Advocate, and Anne was working at her school work with a grim determination, even though she has a book that she can't wait to read that Jane Andrews let her borrow. Good job, Anne. Priorities. Working on that homework before you get to the pleasure. She asks Matthew if he's ever studied geometry himself, and he gives his usual, well, no, I didn't, kind of response, waking up from a little snooze he was having. She sincerely wishes he had, because then he could sympathize with her in a way that only somebody who had witnessed the pains of geometry ever could. I feel your pain, Anne. I feel your pain. Anne calls herself an absolute dunce, and Matthew says, well, now, I don't know, in his soothing way, with some adorable validation. Are you ready for this? I guess you're all right at anything. Mr. Phillips told me last week in Blair's store at Carmody that you were the smartest scholar in school, and we were making rapid progress. Rapid progress was his very word. There's them that runs down Teddy Phillips and says he ain't much of a teacher, but I guess he's all right. Anne admits that she would get along much better with the geometry if he would just stop changing the letters. She learns them by heart, and then he goes and changes it to a different letter, and now she's suddenly lost again. That's another tick in the neurodivergent mind box for me. Anne thrives with repetition, as a lot of us do, and so it's like hard to get it when you have it in your mind's eye looking exactly one way. And while I know that leads to more progress and more growth. It's so frustrating when you're going through it. She also informs Matthew that she has in fact learned what makes the roads red, and it is a great comfort to her. She wonders if Rachel and Marilla are having a good time, remarking about Mrs. Lynde's opinions on how Canada is gone to the dogs. If only women were allowed to vote, there would be a pleasant change. Anne then asks Marilla how he votes, and he proudly says, conservative, as if it is part of his religion to vote as such. Anne announces she's glad to be conservative for Matthew's sake, and as well as glad because some of the boys are grits. Now, I tried to look up exactly like what comparably conservative and grit would have been back then, but I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really find a real prominent answer that I was confident in. And it doesn't really play a major part in this story, so I am not gonna focus too much on the parties. Ruby Gillis told Anne that when a man is courting a woman, he adopts her father's political opinions, leading her to assume that Mr. Phillips was a grit as well, since Prissy's father was. To Anne. She asks Matthew if that is true, and he replies with the faithful, well, now, I don't know. She asks Matthew if he has ever courted anyone, and he admits, well, now, I don't know I ever did. The narrator even lets us know that this is the first time that the thought has ever even crossed Matthew's mind to think about it. Anne reflects and says it must be very interesting, and that Ruby Gillis plans on having many, many beaux. All of them dedicated when she has grown up to winning her heart, and says that Ruby knows a lot about this as she has so many older sisters. Apparently, Mr. Phillips actually even goes to Prissy Andrews' house almost every day, even though the other girl who is going to Queen's needs much more help with her schoolwork than Prissy ever could. Actually, she says is ever so much stupider. She cannot understand it. Well, now, I don't know as I comprehend them all myself, acknowledged Matthew. Anne announces she is going to finish her homework so she could finally read that book that is calling her name. She even, to resist temptation, has to go lock the book in the jam closet and give the key to Matthew for safekeeping. I'm proud of her. I have to have done certain things myself like that where it's like, here, Mom, you hold this away from me. I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to use it. She also offers Matthew that she can go get some russets from the basement, and he says, well, now, I don't know, but I would. So, Matthew speak, oh, yeah, sure, go ahead. It's cute because he doesn't even like russets, but he loves to see the look on Anne's face when he says that he would like them. I am so glad that Matthew has Anne in his life. She really has given it meaning that I don't think it ever had. As soon as she is up from the cellar, there is the sound of flying footsteps on icy boardwalk outside, and the next moment the kitchen door was flung open and in rushed Diana Barry, white-faced and breathless, a shawl wrapped hastily around her head. Anne promptly let go of her candle and plate in her surprise, and plate and candle and apples crashed down the cellar ladder and were found at the bottom, embedded in melted grease the next day by Marilla, who gathered them up and thanked mercy the house hadn't been set on fire. Poor Marilla and house fires. Whatever is the matter, Diana? Cried Anne. Has your mother relented at last? Oh, Anne, do come quick, implored Diana nervously. Minnie May is awful sick. She's got croup, young Mary Jo says, and father and mother are away in town, and there's nobody to go for the doctor. Minnie May is awful bad, and young Mary Jo doesn't know what to do. Oh, Anne, I'm so scared. Poor Diana. Matthew, without a word, reached out for cap and coat, slipped past Diana, and into the darkness of the yard. He's gone to harness the sorrel mare to go to Carmody for the doctor, said Anne, who was hurrying up on hood and jacket. I know it as well as if he had said so. Matthew and I are such kindred spirits. I can read his thoughts without words at all. Diana informs Anne that the doctor is not in Carmody and that he in fact went to town with everyone else for the premiere. Anne, thriving in a crisis, is actually cheerful and reassures Diana, don't cry, Di, and reminds her that Anne knows exactly how to deal with croup as she's brought up so many children, reminding her about Mrs. Heyman and her many, many sets of twins. You give me the small, unexpected traumas like a best friend not being able to talk to me anymore, something I did that had big consequences that I didn't mean to do wrong, or I can't handle that well, but you give me an actual real life crisis, something is really going on, I can snap right into focus, and that's what's happening with Anne. I don't think for a second she sits there and thinks, oh, Mrs. Barry will love me again if I help Minnie. No, for her it's, I know what to do, I can help this little girl, I can help Diana, just selfless, I've got this, superhero mode. Anne tells Diana that she's gonna go get the Ipecac bottle before they go, just in case they don't have any at her house. house. The two little girls hastened out and hand in hand and hurried through Lover's Lane and across the crusted field beyond, for the snow was too deep to go by the shorter way around. Anne, although sincerely sorry for Minnie May, was far from being insensible to the romance of the situation and to the sweetness of once more sharing that romance with a kindred spirit. So yes, Anne is just excited that she can help and be a part of it. Even if I didn't read the rest of the story, even if she never sees Diana again after this, I just know that this would be something that stuck with Anne forever, that she would delight in, with or without Diana in her life. And yes, like I said earlier, I thought her name was Minnie. Diana's little sister is Minnie May. So I'm just going to give a little warning that we are going to have a little bit of a description of what croup is like. It's a little intense, so if you've had a kid with croup, I know my parents had to deal with it with us when we were little, and it's very scary. I will put a timestamp in for after croup. So Anne and Diana quickly make themselves to the house, and Minnie May, aged 3, was really very sick. She lay on the kitchen sofa, feverish and restless, while her hoarse breathing could be heard all over the house. Young Mary Jo, a buxom, broad-faced French girl from the creek, whom Mrs. Barry had engaged to stay with the children during her absence, was helpless and bewildered, quite incapable of thinking of what to do, or doing it if she thought of it. Anne went to work with skill and promptness. Poor Mary Jo. She's the one in charge right now, and she has no idea, and she knows this will all be on her and that poor little baby. If I was her too, no matter what happens tonight, I'm done babysitting. Finances aren't exactly like that, but like that's in my head. It's like, I'm done with children. And if she does still work, I'm sure every time, especially if it's for these children, the mere presence of a sniffle, she'd absolutely panic and be like, where's the ipecac? Anne goes right to work. Minnie May has croup all right. She's pretty bad, but I've seen them worse. First, you must have lots of hot water. I declare, Diana, there isn't much more than a capful in the kettle. There, I filled it up. And Mary Jo, you must put some wood in the stove. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but it seems to me you might have thought of this before if you've had any imagination. Anne, girl! Now undress Minnie May and put her to bed, and you try to find some soft flannel clothes, Diana. I'm going to give her a dose of ipecac, first and all. I love this, seeing Anne in action. She knows what to do. She's directing everyone. They are listening to her. Anne is in the zone. She is hyper-focused, and all she cares about is getting that little girl well. Minnie May is absolutely not a fan of the meds, but Anne had not brought up 3 pairs of twins for nothing. Down that ipecac went, not only once, but many times during the long, anxious night, where the 2 little girls worked patiently over the suffering Minnie May. And young Mary Jo, honestly anxious to do all she could, kept up a roaring fire and heated more water than would have been needed for a hospital of croupy babies. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when Matthew finally arrives with the doctor, but thankfully the need for him has in fact passed. Minnie is sleeping, crisis averted. It was awfully near giving up in despair, explained Anne. She got worse and worse until she was sicker than ever the Heyman twins were. Even the last pair. I'm starting to fade if my reading is not as accentuated, even though when I watch it back, I'm like, you're fine, no one can tell. Oh, can I feel it? And I feel the need to tell you. Anyway, I actually thought she was going to choke to death. I gave her every drop of ipecac in that bottle, and when the last dose went down, I said to myself, not to Diana or young Mary Jo, because I didn't want to worry them any more than they were worried, but I had said to myself, just to relieve my feelings, this is the last lingering hope, and I fear 'tis a vain one. But in about 3 minutes, she coughed up all the phlegm and began to get better right away. You must just imagine my relief, doctor, because I can't express it in words. You know, there are some things that just can't be expressed in words. Yes, I know, nodded the doctor. He looked at Anne as if he were thinking something about her and couldn't express it in words. Later on, he, however, expressed them to Mr. and Mrs. Barry. That little redhead girl they have over at the Cuthberts is as smart as they make 'em. I tell you, she saved that baby's life, for it would have been too late by the time I got there. She seems to have a skill and a presence of mind perfectly wonderful in a child of her age. I never saw anything like the eyes of her when she was explaining the case to me. This is a little petty moment. We're gonna have a petty moment here. I hope Mrs. Barry felt relieved, of course, that her daughter is fine. Yes, we want her to feel okay. I hope she felt that pang of, oh my gosh, I've messed up so bad because squirrel baby. Oh, it's a squirrel baby. He's got a tail. His tail has a leaf stuck to it. Oh, you poor thing. Gosh, the babies are getting so big. But yeah, Anne goes home heavy-eyed and like ready to fall asleep, but she talks nonstop to Matthew. Oh, Matthew, isn't it a wonderful morning? The world looks like something God had just imagined for his own pleasure. Doesn't it? Those trees look like I could just blow them away with a little breath. Poof. I am so glad I live in a world where there are white frosts, aren't you? And I'm so glad Mrs. Heyman had 3 sets of twins after all. If she hadn't, I might have known what to do for Minnie May. I'm really sorry I was ever cross with Mrs. Hammond for having twins. But oh, Matthew, I'm so sleepy. I am so sleepy too. I can't go to school. I just know I couldn't keep my eyes open and I'd be so stupid. But I hate to stay home for some of the others will get to the head of the class. And it's so hard to get up again. Although, of course, the harder it is, the more satisfaction you have when you do get up, haven't you? Well, now, I guess you managed all right, said Matthew, looking at Anne's white little face and the darker shadows under her eyes. You just go right to bed and have a good sleep. I'll do all the chores. Anne falls asleep and then wakes again in the afternoon, when Marilla is home and knitting. Anne asked Marilla what the premiere looked like, and she responds in a very Marilla way. Well, now, he never got to be his premiere on account of his looks, said Marilla. Such a nose that man had, but he can speak. I was proud of being a conservative. Rachel Lynde, of course, being a liberal, had no use for him. Your dinner is in the oven, Anne, and you can get yourself some blue plum preserves out of the pantry. I guess you're hungry. Matthew has been telling me about last night. I must say it was fortunate you knew what to do. I wouldn't have had any idea for myself, for I had never seen a case of croup. There now, never mind talking until you've had dinner. I can tell by the look of you that you're full up with speeches, but they'll keep. Marilla waits until Anne has eaten, knowing beforehand it would be absolutely too exciting for Anne to hear. Mrs. Barry had come by while she was sleeping, apologizing about the current wine situation. She believes Anne now and hopes that Anne will be friends with Diana again, and they wanted her over that very evening. Now, Anne Shirley, for pity's sakes, don't fly up into the air. Anne has sprung to her feet and her face is full of the flame of her spirit. Begs Marilla to be able to go without washing the dishes, and Marilla agrees before shouting, Anne Shirley, are you crazy? Come back here this minute and put something on you. I may as well call to the wind. She's gone without a cap or wrap. Look at her tearing through the orchard with her hair streaming. It'll be a mercy if she doesn't catch her death of cold. Almost bringing her story to actuality here, Anne. I can almost hear the laughter in Marilla's voice as she says that. Anne came dancing home in the purple winter twilight across the snowy places. Afar in the southwest was the great shimmering, pearl-like sparkle of an evening star in a sky that was a pale golden and ethereal rose over gleaming white spaces of dark glens and spruce. The tingles of sleigh bells among the snowy hill came like elfin chimes through the frosty air, but their music was not sweeter than the song in Anne's heart and on her lips. Such a beautiful description. You see before you, Marilla, a perfectly happy person. Marilla, she announced, I'm perfectly happy. Yes, in spite of my red hair. Just at present, I have a soul above red hair. Mrs. Barry kissed me and cried and said she was sorry and she could never repay me. I felt fearfully embarrassed, Marilla, but I just said politely as I could, I have no hard feelings for you, Mrs. Barry. I assure you once and for all that I did not mean to intoxicate Diana, and henceforth I shall cover the past with a mantle of oblivion. That was pretty dignified way of speaking, wasn't it, Marilla? And I'm kind of the same when somebody has wronged me, and as long as you apologize, I don't necessarily forget, as in know that I protect my own heart, protect my own energy, but I am more often than not willing to forgive if somebody actually, takes the accountability. You know what I mean? She and Diana had a lovely afternoon together. Diana showed her a new crochet stitch that her aunt had taught her. Not a soul in Avonlea knows it but us, and we pledged the solemn vow never to reveal it to anyone. Diana gave me a beautiful card with a wreath of roses on it and a verse of poetry. If you love me as I love you, nothing but death can part us two. Girl! Gilbert might be her, spoiler alert, future husband, but Diana, by far, is in fact her soulmate. And as somebody who has a platonic soulmate, it absolutely is possible. Anne admits to Marilla the poem is absolutely true and that they're going to ask Mr. Phillips to let them sit together again at school. She exclaims that for the first time ever, somebody used their best china for her during tea time. Anne remarks that it must absolutely be lovely to grow up, and Marilla responds, I don't know about that, said Marilla with a brief sigh. A brief sigh that probably kind of lends itself to exactly what you and I might think when she says that. Don't be so quick, Anne. Don't be so quick. Anne announces that when she grows up, she's gonna talk to little girls like they were adults and will never laugh when they use big words. And this is why people think I'm so good with kids. It's because I remember what it was like to be so invalidated, and children are real people with big emotions, with real memories. They're humans, and a lot of people don't see them as that. They see them as objects. That's one of the things that makes me see myself in her, is that desire to be better so that no other child feels the way that others made you feel. Mrs. Barry asks Anne to make sure she comes over as often as she wants. And on the way out, Diana stood at the windows giving her kisses, kisses, kisses. She reassures Marilla that she really feels like praying that night and is going to think of an extra special one. All is right in Anne's world, except of course, the inclusion of you-know-who. And with that, we are at the end of chapter 18. Now on to chapter 19. Chapter 19. A concert, a catastrophe, and a confession. Oh, that sounds like a hot time. We start this chapter actually with a question of my own. The heck is this chapter about? It is the very first one where the title, while I was writing this, did not make me remember what was happening. Which now, in hindsight, how did it not make me remember what was happening? Because now I'm like, oh yeah, that was this part. But the first time around, I was like, what? One February evening, Anne comes in breathlessly asking Marilla if she could go see Diana. Marilla reminds her that she talked in the cold with her for over a half hour after walking home with her, so she is in no need of communication. Anne demands that Diana wants to see Anne at once, and Marilla asks her how she could possibly know that. Anne explains that they signaled to each other with cardboard and candles through their windows, duh. But of course, hearing that Anne and Diana signal with candles and cardboard reignites Marilla's worst fear. Anne is gonna burn the house down. Anne reassures Marilla that they are very, very careful, and she explains their whole system. Another perk of reading the book. 5 flashes is the most urgent one, and that is what Diana was using. Well, you needn't suffer any longer, says Marilla Well, you needn't suffer any longer, says Marilla sarcastically. You can go, but you're to be back here in just 10 minutes. Remember that. Anne was back in time, and when she gets back, she is delighted to tell Marilla that the next day is Diana's birthday, and that Anne has been invited by Diana's mother to sleep over. I bet you didn't think Anne would be having a slumber party. Oh my goodness. Diana's cousins are going to be taking them to a concert because of course, Marilla will say yes. No. She says no. You can calm down then, because you're not going. You're better at home in your own bed. And as for that club concert, it's all nonsense, and the little girls should not be allowed to go out such places at all. Marilla! What a time to be strict! Anne tries to defend the respectability of the night, and Marilla said she never said it wasn't respectable, but that Anne was not to be staying out. Frankly, she was shocked that Diana's mother would let her do so. Anne is on the verge of tears and continues to plead with Marilla to let her go, even stating that one of the pieces are going to be very, very moral. They will even be playing hymns. Marilla tells her to go to bed. Anne shoots her shot and says there is just one more thing. She offers the fact that Mrs. Barry told them they could sleep in the spare room. The ultimate honor at a sleepover. Marilla tells Anne that it is an honor that she shall go without, and tearfully goes to bed. When she's gone, Matthew, who had been pretending the whole time like a sneaky little man that he was sleeping on the couch, says to Marilla, well, now, Marilla, I think you ought to let Anne go. I don't then, retorted Marilla. Who's bringing this child up, Matthew, you or me? Well, now, you, admitted Matthew. Don't interfere then. Well, now, I ain't interfering. It ain't interfering to have your own opinion. And my opinion is you ought to let Anne go. Look at Matthew and Marilla. Look at Matthew. He has an opinion. I'm pretty sure Matthew having an opinion was never anything that even existed, but he is steadfast on this. You'd think I'd ought to let Anne go to the moon if she took to the notion, I have no doubt, was Marilla's admirable rejoinder. I might have let her spend the night with Diana, if that was all. But I don't approve of this concert plan. She'd go there and catch a cold, like not, and have her head filled with nonsense and excitement. It would unsettle her for a week. I understand that child's disposition and what's good for her better than you, Matthew. Matthew, having absolutely all the guts in the world now, repeats, I think you ought to let Anne go, he repeats firmly. Arguing, of course, has never been his strong point. The fact that he was sticking to his guns, though, made Marilla go silent. And it isn't till the next morning they speak again. While Anne is washing the breakfast dishes, Matthew pauses before going out to the barn to say to Marilla again, I think you ought to let Anne go, Marilla. Very well, then, she can go since nothing else will please you. Anne flew out of the pantry, dripping dishcloth in hand. Oh my gosh, Matthew got her his way. I love it. Oh, Marilla, say those blessed words again. I guess once is enough to say them. This is Matthew's doing, and I wash my hands of it. But if you catch pneumonia sleeping in a strange bed or coming out of that hot hall in the middle of the night, don't blame me. Blame Matthew. And Shirley, you're dripping greasy water all over the floor. I never saw such a careless child. This is one of those sums everything up you need to know moments absolutely perfectly. One of the author's specialties and one of the reasons I just love her writing. Anne apologizes, admitting she really has been a great trial for Marilla, and insists she will go get some sand and scrub up the spots before she leaves for school. A technique which I'd never heard of. Of course, they live on an island, but I'm interested. She emphasizes that her heart truly was set on this. She says that Matthew truly understands her. Anne was far too excited to really perform her best in school that day, and thanks to Mr. Phillips not giving a thanks to Mr. Phillips not caring as much about his other students as he did Prissy, he never noticed the fact that Diana and Anne were chattering on about the night's events all day. Nobody, in fact, can talk of anything else that day. I think everyone's actually going, is the whole thing. So the real excitement begins when the school bell rings, if the school bell rings, when the end of school. Does it? I don't remember. The girls had a perfectly elegant tea, and then they go up to Diana's room to get dressed. Diana does Anne's hair in the new pompadour style. Anne fashions bows artistically up in Diana's hair. At last they were ready, cheeks scarlet and eyes glowing with excitement. It's pure bliss, and what a juxtaposition to Anne's former life. So just Anne like a month ago, Anne thought she would never be able to be with Diana again. Anne has a pang of self-consciousness when she compares her homemade clothes to Diana's purchased ones. But then she remembers this is exactly why she has her imagination. The cousins came and they all loaded up. Anne admired the sunset on the way over, as well as, of course, the rest of the view. "Oh, Diana!" breathed Anne, squeezing Diana's mittened hand under the fur robe. "Isn't it all like a beautiful dream? Did I really look the same as usual? I feel so different that it seems to me it must show in my looks." "You look awfully nice, Anne," said Diana, who had just received a compliment from one of her cousins and felt she ought to pass it on. "You've got the loveliest color." For Anne, at least, the concert is full of thrills. Prissy is there in a new outfit in pearls, which is rumored the master actually purchased for her. Disgusting. Oh, and she has a carnation in her hair too, of course. Thrill after thrill after thrill until Gilbert Blythe recited "Bingin' on the Rye," and our spiteful queen picks up a library book and reads it over and over until he's finished. The girls didn't get home till about 11, and they tiptoed their way to the fire to warm up. Anne remarks that it had been a delightful time, and it must have been incredible to perform, and she asks Diana if she thinks either of them will ever be up there. Diana reassures her that one day, they just prefer older scholars. She mentions she doesn't understand how Anne did not listen when he looked right at her, reciting, "There's another, not a sister." Anne says that not even she, Diana, can speak of that person to her. It is a heart-fluttering moment, I admit, Diana. I'm with Diana there, even the swoon. Anne asks Diana if she wants to run a race to see who can get to the bed fastest. The suggestion appealed to Diana. The two little white-clad figures flew down the long room, through the spare room door, and bounded on the bed at the same moment. And then, something moving beneath them, there was a gasp and a cry, and somebody said in muffled accents, "Merciful goodness! Merciful goodness!" Anne and Diana were never able to tell just how they got off that bed and out of that. They only knew that after one frantic rush, they found themselves tiptoeing, shivering upstairs. "Oh, what was it? What was it?" whispered Anne, her teeth chattering in the cold and fright. "It was Aunt Josephine," gasping with laughter. "Oh, Anne, it was Aunt Josephine. However she came to be there. Oh, I know she'll be furious. Who is your Aunt Josephine?" Of course, that was Anne. "She's Father's aunt that lives in Charlestown. She's awfully old, 70 anyhow, and I don't believe she was ever a little girl. We were expecting her out for a visit, but not so soon. She's awfully prim and prop. She'll scold dreadfully about this. I know. Well, we'll have to sleep with Minnie May. You just can't think of how she kicks." Miss Josephine Barry was not at breakfast that morning, and Mrs. Barry smiled kindly down at the two girls. "Did you have a good time last night? I tried to stay awake until you came home, for I wanted to tell you Aunt Josephine had come and that you would have to go upstairs after all. I was so tired I fell asleep. I hope you didn't disturb your aunt, Diana." This is such a classic Anne story. It's so funny. The two exchange guilty smiles over the table, and Anne hurries home after breakfast. She didn't have any knowledge of what was happening at the Barry household until the very next afternoon. Anne goes over to Mrs. Lynde's house to run an errand, and with a twinkle in her eye, she tells Anne sternly that she scared Miss Barry half to death that night. She had just stopped by her house, and she was in fact in an extremely terrible temper about it. She couldn't even speak to Diana. Remember what I said about how she makes us hate characters at first, but then we absolutely love them? Anne says that it was her idea, and Mrs. Rachel Lynde says, "I knew it." Mrs. Barry was supposed to stay for a month, but now would have been gone if there was a ride out of town already. She was gonna pay for Diana's music lessons, but now she would do no such thing for a tomboy like her. She tells Anne that the Barrys must be really upset, as she is a rich woman and, wills. Anne asks Mrs. Lynde why she thinks Anne is so unlucky. "It's because you're too heedless and impulsive, child. That's what. You never stop to think. Whatever comes in your head to say or do, you say or do it without a moment's reflection." "Oh, but that's the best of it, protested Anne. Something just flashes in your mind, so exciting, and you must out with it. If you stop to think it's over, you spoil it all. Have you never felt that yourself, Mrs. Lynde? No, Mrs. Lynde had not. She shook her head sagely. You must learn to think a little, Anne. That's what the proverb you need to go by is look before you leap, especially into spare room beds. Mrs. Lynde laughs at her joke, but Anne takes it very seriously and is very pensive as she heads out on over to Orchard Slope. Diana confirms at the door how cross her aunt was, giggling, dancing even with rage. She didn't care about the insults, but her parents did. Anne asks why Diana did not admit that it was all her fault, and Diana says that she is no tattle. I wonder if part of her is afraid her mother wouldn't let her have around anymore. Anne says that she is going to go speak to Miss Josephine herself, ignoring Diana's wails and pleas for her not to. She said she's going to scare her more than she already was. Diana tells her that she is in the room, but not to go in, and of course, Anne does not listen and she goes on in. Anne goes over and knocks faintly, and was met with a sharp, come on in. Mrs. Josephine Barry, thin, prim, and rigid, was knitting fiercely by the fire, her wrath quite unappeased, and her eyes snapping through her gold-rimmed glasses. She wheeled around in her chair, expecting to see Diana, and beheld a white-faced girl whose great eyes were brimming up with a mixture of desperate courage and shrinking terror. Who are you? Demanded Miss Josephine Barry, without ceremony. I am Anne of Green Gables, said the small visitor tremendously, clasping her hands with her charismatic gesture, and I've come to confess, if you please. Confess what? That it was all my fault about jumping onto the bed on you last night. I suggested it. Diana would never have thought of such a thing, I am sure. Diana is a very ladylike girl, Miss Barry, so you must see how unjust it is to blame her. Oh, I must, hey? I rather think Diana did her share of the jumping at least. Such carrying on in a respectable house. But we were only in fun, persisted Anne. I think you ought to forgive us, Miss Barry, now that we've apologized, and anyhow, please forgive Diana, and let her have her music lessons. Diana's heart is set on her music lessons, Miss Barry, and I know too well what it is to set your heart on a thing and not get it. If you must be cross with anyone, be cross with me. I've been so used to, in my early days, to having people cross at me that I can endure it much better than Diana can. Much of the snap had gone out of the old lady's eyes by this point, and was replaced with a twinkle of amusement interest. But she still said severely, I don't think it is any excuse for you that you were only in fun. Little girls never indulge in that kind of fun when I was young. You don't know what it is to be awakened out of a sound sleep after a long and arduous journey by two great girls coming bouncing down on you. I don't know, but I can imagine, says Anne eagerly. I'm sure it must have been disturbing, but then there is the other side of it too. Have you any imagination, Miss Barry? If you had, just put yourself in our place. And only Anne can talk to someone like Miss Josephine Barry like this. If you have, just put yourself in our place. We didn't know there was anyone in that bed, and you nearly scared us to death. It was simple awful the way we felt, and we couldn't sleep in the spare room as we'd been promised. I suppose you are used to sleeping in spare rooms, but just imagine what you would feel like if you were a little orphan girl who had never had such an honor. At this, all of the snap went out of her voice, and she actually started laughing, much to Diana's absolute relief. I'm afraid my imagination is a little rusty. It's so long since I've used it, she said. I dare say your claim to sympathy is just as strong as mine. It all depends on the way we look at it. Sit down here and tell me about yourself. Anne admits regretfully that she cannot, even if she does feel as Miss Josephine is a kindred spirit despite her looks, but it's her duty to return now to Marilla. This is another moment where I kind of starting to think that maybe I should start watching the show at the same time, because there is so much to do with Aunt Josephine. I want to have it in my mind. I don't want to misspeak. This is a YouTube video. I don't want to misspeak when it gets to certain topics, so I really need to start watching that show. Maybe I will do that and make that a kind of shorter, quicker video. Let me know if you think I should. I also really wonder about her childhood and her story, and I really wish that we had one point gotten her childhood, her as a main character in a series. It's interesting because she says her imagination is rusty, not that it's non-existent like Marilla, so she really is a kindred spirit. I can't wait until we start to get more into her and talking about little stories, and then when I do, of course, watch the show. So Anne says, Miss Marilla Cuthbert is a very kind lady who has taken to bringing me up properly. She is doing her best, but it is very discouraging work. You must not blame her because I jumped on the bed. Before I do go, I wish you would tell me if you would forgive Diana and stay just as long as you meant to stay in Avonlea. I think perhaps if you will come over and talk to me occasionally, said Miss Barry. She gives Diana a bracelet that evening and even decides she wants to stay even just simply to get to know Anne better. An amusing person at her age is such a rarity. Marilla's only comment when Anne told her the story was, I told you so. That was for Matthew's benefit. Miss Barry stayed her month out and over. She was more agreeable guest than usual, for Anne kept her in good humor. They became firm friends. When she's leaving, she tells her, remember, Anne Girl, when you come to town to visit, I'll I'll put you in my sparest spare room bed to sleep in. Miss Barry was a kindred spirit after all, Anne confided to Marilla. You wouldn't think so to look at her, but she is. You don't find it right out at first, as in Matthew's case, but after a while you come to see it. Kindred spirits are not so scarce as I used to think. It's splendid to find out there's so many of them in this world. It really is, and I love when she finds new kindred spirits. I love when I find new kindreds. With that, I'm at the end of chapter 5. Chapter 19. Chapter 5. We're on to our final chapter of the video. Chapter 20. Alright, so the final chapter of the video, chapter 20. A good imagination gone wrong. Canadian spring had sprung, aka April to May, at Green Gables. We get a description of the landscape almost a year since Anne arrived. And we, of course, skipped right over her birthday. I wonder how she spent it. It was her first one there, and we never get to find out. In this season, as in anybody living in this season, not like in this season of the show, but Anne feels sorry for people who don't have Mayflowers. Diana thinks that they must have something better, but Anne says there's absolutely nothing better. Diana retorted, if they don't know what they're like, they don't miss them. Anne thinks, of course, that that is the saddest thing of all. She tells Marilla that it would absolutely be tragic to not know what Mayflowers are. She tells Marilla that she thinks Mayflowers are the souls of the flowers that died last summer, and this is their heaven. But we had a splendid time, Marilla. We had our lunch down in a big mossy hollow by an old well, such a romantic spot. Anne tells Marilla about how all the boys were giving each other dares and how no one would ever dare not take a dare. And she tells Marilla how Mr. Phillips picked all of the flowers he could for Prissy. Someone whose name she will never admit, we know who, tried to give her some flowers, but she rejected them with absolute scorn. She joined in, of course, with everyone else, making a wreath, and then she sang in the streets with Silas Sloane's people. Not much wonder, such silly doings, was Marilla's response. After the Mayflowers came the violets, and Violet Vale was empurpled with them. Anne walked through it on her way to school with reverent steps and worshipping eyes, as if she trod on holy ground. She sees the Violet Vale as her own kind of holy place and says it would be the absolute most perfect place to pray. And I agree. I always felt just in tune with nature ever since I was young, and like that's my praying. She says that while she is there, she told Diana that while she is there, she doesn't care about what anyone thinks about her, especially Gil, you know who, despite feeling the absolute opposite in that building. She talks about there are many Annes inside of her, and she really wishes there was just one. And that's something that I really hits to the core for me too. Oh, it is starting to rain. We're gonna try to still finish out the chapter. But yeah, the first time I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, absolutely same. Especially when she says that she knows she wouldn't be as interesting, and to her core, she would be a different person. Same thing, like I wouldn't change myself because I like who I am. We skip ahead to a June evening, where once again the orchard had their pink blossoms, and Anne was sitting by her window studying until it became too dark to, and after that she just looked out beyond, past the Snow Queen, who was once again back in her true beauty. In all essential respects, the little gable was unchanged. The walls were as white, the pincushion as hard, the chairs as stiffly and yellowly upright as ever. Yet the whole character of the room was altered. It was a full view of new, vital, pulsing personality that seemed to pervade it and be quite independent of the schoolgirl books and dresses and ribbons, even of the cracked blue jug full of apple blossoms on the table, as if all of the dreams, sleeping and waking, of its vivid occupant had taken a visible, although unmaterial form, and had tapestried the bare room with a splendid filmy tissue of rainbows and moonshine. That wording, that imagery, it sums up the last year absolutely beautifully. Marilla has a horrible headache when she brings in some of Anne's school aprons for her. Anne wishes she could take Marilla's pain away and take it onto herself, and Marilla admits she didn't really help things by getting all the work done while she had the headache. She gets a little bit sarcastic, saying, I guess you did your part in attending to that work and letting me rest, said Marilla. You seem to have gotten on fairly well and made fewer mistakes than usual. Of course, it wasn't exactly necessary to starch Matthew's handkerchiefs, and most people, when they put a pie into the oven, warm it up for dinner and take it out and eat it when it gets hot instead of leaving it to be burned in a crisp. That doesn't seem to be your way, evidently. Anne emphatically apologizes about burning the pie. She knew she forgot something, but she didn't remember what until just then. But of course, again, her imagination was the cause. She didn't know she starched the handkerchiefs because imagination. She wants to be extra good that day because it's actually an anniversary. She asks Marilla if she can remember what anniversary exactly it is, and while Marilla can't, she says it's the anniversary of her coming to Green Gables. I shall never forget it. It was a turning point in my life. Of course, it wouldn't seem important to you. I've been here for a year, and I've been so happy. Of course, I've had my troubles, but one can live down troubles. Are you sorry you kept me, Marilla? No, I can't say I'm sorry, said Marilla, who sometimes wondered how she could have lived before Anne came to Green Gables. No, no, not exactly sorry. Marilla then switches topics quickly and asks Anne to run over to Mrs. Barry's to get an apron pattern from her. She asks if she can do it not tonight because it's too dark outside, and Marilla's like, too dark? Nonsense, Anne, and sends her out despite her pleas otherwise. I'll have to go by the road then, said Anne, taking up her hat reluctantly. Go by the road and waste a half hour. I'd like to catch you. I can't go through the haunted wood, Marilla, cried Anne desperately. Marilla stared. The haunted wood? Are you crazy? What under the canopy is a haunted wood? The spruce wood over the brook, Anne said in a whisper. Fiddlesticks! There's no such thing as a haunted wood anywhere. Who has been telling you such stuff? Of course, she confesses, nobody. Diana and I just imagined the wood was haunted. All the places around here are so commonplace. We just got this up for our own amusement. It began in April. Hunting woods is very romantic, Marilla. We chose the spruce grove because it's so gloomy. Oh, we have imagined the most harrowing things. There's a white lady that walks along the brook just in the time of night and who wrings her hands and utter wailing cries. She appears when there's been a death in the family, and the ghost of a little murdered child that haunts the corner up by Idlewood. It creeps up behind you and it lays its cold fingers on your hands. Oh, Marilla, it gives me a shudder just to think about it. And there's Headless Man that stalks up right down the path and the skeletons glower at you between the boughs. Oh, Marilla, I wouldn't go through the haunted wood after dark now for anything. I'd be sure that the white things would reach out from behind the trees and grab me. Marilla was listening to her with absolutely dumb amazement. And Shirley, do you mean to tell me you believe all those wicked nonsense of your imagination? Not believe exactly, faltered Anne. At least I don't believe it in the daylight. But after dark, Marilla, it's different. That's when the ghosts walk. There are no such thing as ghosts, Anne. Oh, but there are, Marilla, cried Anne eagerly. She even says that some respectable people have, in fact, seen them, including Charlie Sloane's grandmother, a very religious woman, not likely to lie. And then Anne tells her about how Mr. Thomas's father insisted that he saw his brother's spirit, and then starts to tell of Ruby, saying that she doesn't want to hear her talking about this again. She chastises Anne for it and then tells her to go through the woods as a lesson and a warning. Anne pleads not to because absolutely her terror is 100% real, but gives in, wailing. Oh, Marilla, how can you be so cruel, sobbed Anne. What would you feel like if a white little thing did snatch me up and carry me off? I'll risk it, says Marilla unforgivingly. You know I mean what I say. I'll cure you of imagining ghosts into places. March now. The sass of Marilla is so beautiful. Where Matthew is cute and endearing, Marilla is a sassy queen. The walk was absolutely a horrifying one, and I think I'm just as tired as I was at the time I was writing this in the script, because I made note that I'm tired to kind of tell myself if it doesn't make much sense. Whew, we're getting there. The chapter is almost done. For Anne, it is actually a lesson that she will never forget, and thank God Diana is not home, so she's able to just go over, get the pattern, not linger, and race back to where she wants to be in an equally terrifying trip back home. Well, nothing caught you, says Sassilla. Get it, Marilla? Sassilla. Oh, Marilla, chattered Anne. Be content with commonplace after this. And there we go, friends. We are at the end of chapter 20. Next up, chapter 21 in the next video. So I'm so excited. I'm gonna go write these, edit these. I can't wait to see how frequently I'm able to put out a video. Ideally, it's gonna be whenever I get a new one done. Yes, so thank you so much. If you are watching to this point, in the video, please leave me a little flower emoji below, and that just like will make my day. Any kind of comments. I never really understood, especially new people were like, please like and comment. For me, it's not even about analytics. For me, it's like, I literally want to know what you think. I literally just want to know what you think, guys. If you're liking it, who's there? It's hard because you look at views, and a view can be just like a little click. You just kind of checked it out really quick and you said, oh, I'm gonna come back to it. You accidentally clicked on it again, and I never do that. I never do that watching other people's videos, and now I'm so afraid of the moments I accidentally click on a video because it makes it like all out of order, and I don't know how the analytics go. I've already been like, no, I've got to try to not look at the analytics. Yes, thank you. If you are here at all, because I'm just excited to share this with the world. I don't know if you can hear the rain. I'm like sitting here like I'm like, I have the camera. We are looking at the ceiling now. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe. Click the like button. Give me your comments below. Tell me, I don't know what. Anyways, make sure you click on my description below. Stay safe. Stay strong. True to yourself. I don't know. I'm tired. I gotta go. Okay. Bye.